Welcome to Module 2, Leadership's Role in Building an Incredible Workplace Culture. By the end of this module, we will understand why leaders are the strongest drivers of culture. We'll learn how leadership behaviors send visible and invisible cultural signals. We'll recognize the concept of leaders as culture carriers. We'll also understand how trust, fear, and psychological safety are shaped by leadership actions. We'll identify common ways leaders unintentionally damage culture. We learn why silence, inconsistency, and tolerance shape culture faster than intention. We'll understand the cultural impact of how leaders respond to mistakes, how leaders handle disagreement, how leaders reward performance versus behavior. We'll clarify the role of HR and cultural champions in enabling and influencing leaders. We'll also learn how conscious leadership behavior builds sustainable, incredible cultures. So there it goes. When organizations talk about building an incredible workplace, the conversation often starts with HR, as we said in the last module. But in reality, incredible cultures are shaped far more by leaders than policies, frameworks, or initiatives. So if you truly want to understand the culture of an organization, don't begin by reading the value statement. Begin by observing the leaders. Because whether they realize it or not, leaders are always shaping culture. Every action of leaders is shaping culture. Every leader is a culture carrier. Leadership is not only about strategy, targets, or results. Leadership is also about the signals leaders send every single day. These signals are not always verbal. In fact, the strongest culture signals are often non-verbal. Isn't it surprising? So how do we see that? People watch how leaders react under pressure, how leaders behave when things go wrong. Very important. How leaders treat people who disagree with them, how leaders behave when no one is watching. And based on these observations, employees adjust their own behavior. Let me say this very, very clearly. People do not do what leaders say. People do what leaders consistently do. A leader may talk about openness, but if they shut down their dissent, the culture becomes silent. A leader may talk about respect, but if they tolerate rude behavior from high performers, the culture becomes fearful. A leader may talk about ethics, but if shortcuts are rewarded, the culture becomes compromised. This is how leadership behaviors becomes culture. Culture is not shaped in big speeches or town halls. Culture is shaped in everyday leadership moments. For example, how does a leader respond when bad news is shared? Do they ask questions or do they react with anger? How does a leader behave in meetings? Do they invite participation or dominate the conversation? How does a leader handle mistakes? Do they focus on learning or on blame? These moments answer unspoken questions in the minds of employees. Questions like, is it safe to speak up here? Is it okay to make mistakes and learn? Will I be treated fairly? Over time, the answers to these questions become the culture. Most leaders do not damage culture intentionally. In fact, most leaders genuinely want to build an incredible workplace. Culture damage usually happens unintentionally. It happens through silence, inconsistency, excessive pressure, avoidance of difficult conversations. Let's take an example. When a leader avoids addressing toxic behaviors because a person delivers results, a clear message is sent to the organization. The message is not verbal, but it is very loud. Results matter more than behavior. And that message shapes culture far more powerfully than any value statement. One of the most powerful truths about the culture is this: what leaders tolerate becomes the culture of tomorrow. I'll repeat. What leaders tolerate today becomes the culture of tomorrow. Leaders do not need to actively encourage bad behavior for it to become the culture. They only need to tolerate it. Silence from leadership is never neutral. Silence is also a decision. In incredible workplaces, leaders are conscious of this responsibility. They understand that leadership is not only about driving performance, It is also about creating the conditions in which performance can be sustained. Now, this includes psychological safety, trust, fairness, clarity, and consistency. These are not soft outcomes, these are the cultural foundations. Now, HR plays an important role here. HR cannot own culture alone. But yes, HR can enable leaders, challenge leaders, support leaders, and sometimes hold up a mirror to the leadership behavior. As culture champions, our role is not to blame leaders. Our role is to help leaders see the impact of their everyday behavior. Incredible cultures are not built by perfect leaders, they are built by conscious leaders. Leadership behavior is the strongest culture shaping force in any organization. And this is why leadership sits at the center of building an incredible workplace.